I know Gojo Satoru is a really popular character from Jujutsu Kaisen, but to be totally honest with you, I can't tell you all that much about him because I've literally just begun watching the show. But what I can tell you about him is that he's responsible for having revived dead Japanese slang. What do I mean? That's what I'm going to talk about today. Towards the end of episode 3 of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo Satoru shows up and says,
otsukaresamansa! 子供は送り届けたよ!
otsukaresamansa! So this is a greeting, and it also happens to be 1980s Japanese slang. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't aware of this, but when I started looking into this, when I first noticed this word, I got several sources that said, apparently this traces its origins back to 1980s Japan. However, this is also dead Japanese slang. What that means is that it's not in common usage anymore. It fell out of favor and it became lame or uncool to use it. However, Gojo Satoru sparked a bit of a revival in this word. But before I get to that, let's break down what this word means. Otsukaresamansa is a combination of two words. So the first one is otsukaresama. That's a greeting. I'll get into more detail in just a moment on that one. The other word is actually a person's name. It's samansa, or as we would say in English, Samantha. As you can probably tell, otsukaresama and samansa share the sama part. So smash these together and you get otsukaresamansa. As for otsukaresama, this is a very common Japanese greeting that is often used instead of hello or goodbye. It's basically used in that kind of way, in that when you see somebody, you say otsukaresama, or when you leave, you say otsukaresama, but there's an extra nuance to this word. By using it, you are expressing your appreciation or gratitude for the listener's hard work. This is a rather tricky term to translate, but often you see it translated as good job. But like I said, it's often used instead of goodbye or hello. So that's why it gets kind of tricky to translate it. In episode 3 of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo shows up and says this word to the other characters after they just got done, let's just say, putting in some hard work. So this makes total sense. He's expressing his gratitude and his appreciation for the hard work that they just did. However, he's also kind of a laid-back character. So by him saying otsukaresama in this very quirky, wacky, silly way, it works with his character, right? He's not just saying good job, he's kind of adding this extra jokey element to it. As for the origins of this word, a couple different sources say that it comes from the 1980s, and there's a lot of 1980s Japanese slang. It's a really interesting topic, but I'm not going to go too deep into that. There's a couple different sources that are cited for possible origins. The first one is the 1960s American sitcom Bewitched. So you may not be aware of this sitcom because it's so old, but basically the premise was that this witch whose name was Samantha got married to a normal guy, and so they get into all kind of hijinks because she uses her magic, but she kind of has to hide it. And anyway, it's a wacky show from the 1960s. It did air in Japan as well. So that show probably popularized the name Samantha. And so you can imagine that if this otsukaresamansa was a term that was at least somewhat popular in the 1980s, that people that grew up in the 60s and 70s, maybe who watched reruns of Bewitched, they knew the name Samantha from Bewitched. And so somebody came along and combined otsukaresama and samansa and got otsukaresamansa. The other theory that I came across that traces the origins of otsukaresamansa to the 1980s says that this term originated with Sakai Noriko. She is a Japanese idol and media personality, and she was also known for having a knack for coming up with original terms and very quirky terms. Sakai Noriko, aka Noripi, that was her nickname. was so known for coming up with these quirky terms that, in fact, people referred to these original words that she came up with as Noripi Go or Noripi language. So it's totally plausible that the originator of otsukaresamansa is Sakai Noriko, or maybe even one of her fans who was inspired by the way Sakai Noriko used language. Unfortunately, these are all just theories and neither has been 100% confirmed. What is confirmed, though, is that Jujutsu Kaisen sparked a resurgence in the popularity of this term. Jujutsu Kaisen began airing in October of 2020, and it was shortly thereafter where you started getting videos on TikTok of people using this word and people creating memes using otsukaresamansa.
Oh, otsukaresamansa! Otsukaresamansa! Yay!
I also came across posts on X and Yahoo of people asking about otsukaresamansa, and I even saw one post of somebody saying, like, I thought this term was dead. Did it just make a comeback? So even though I wouldn't say this was a sensation that swept all of Japanese culture and society, it was notable enough for people who haven't watched or read Jujutsu Kaisen to notice and be a little confused by it. As for whether this term is still being used, I'd say probably not. I think it was only really a big thing among Jujutsu Kaisen fans. So if you were to use this with people who haven't watched or read Jujutsu Kaisen, they'd probably be confused and think like, why are you using this old, dead, kind of lame slang? So just don't do it. If you have friends that are really into Jujutsu Kaisen, then maybe, yeah, go ahead. But for this random slang from the 1980s to make a comeback in this way and get kind of trendy on TikTok and all that is a pretty notable thing. So that just goes to show how much of a hit Jujutsu Kaisen was from the very beginning. If you like learning about anime and 1980s Japanese slang, make sure to check out my video where I talk about how Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure also uses 1980s Japanese slang. But what do you think? Do you want more Jujutsu Kaisen videos? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I've got more videos coming like this. I'll see you in the next one, and otsukaresamansa!